The dream that my 11-year-old self had seen was finally on the verge of becoming a reality. And yet, somewhere deep down inside me, I knew something was wrong. I did not want to accept that everything around me felt colorless. I did not want to accept that I was depressed and I still wanted to kill myself. I was still making myself bleed any way I could. But this time, I thought to myself, I am Arjun Gupta, an author and a blogger, and this is the story of how I survived clinical depression. Ever since I was a child, I had been raised in a loving family. I was the youngest of the family and had two elder sisters who were more than happy to substitute for my mom. I would joke around that I had three mothers. Academically, I was a high achiever, always close to the toppers of the class. In extracurricular activities, I was very active in quizzes, speeches, declamation, debates, anything you can think of. And I also enjoyed watching cricket and playing football. Along with all those things, I had a dream. I wanted to be a surgeon just like my father. I used to go to the operation theatre with him and we used to be fascinated by the insides of a human body. I remember it was in class 6 that I first told myself, Bhai, tu doctor banega. It was that voice in my mind telling me, that voice in our mind that reads stuff out for us when we are reading something, the voice in our mind. Little did I know that in a few years' time, this voice was going to destroy me from the inside. Flash forward to 2015, and I had in my hands the result of my medical entrance exam. I had gotten in with flying colors. All my hard work of the last 2 years in 11th and 12th had finally paid off. The dream that my 11-year-old self had seen was finally on the verge of becoming a reality. I was over the moon. I got an admission into my family college. It was a family college because, well, my father had graduated from there and my sister. So it was sort of a family tradition thing for me. And yet, somewhere deep down inside me, I knew something was wrong. I could feel something happening inside me that was negative. There was this negativity inside me that just would not go away. On the first day of the college, I was like a child in a candy store, fascinated by everything around me. I used to see everything and observe it as minutely as possible. Even in the dissection hall, I was so happy that teachers actually pointed it out. On the first day itself, I bought all the books I had needed for the first year, almost bankrupted myself, but at that moment, it was totally worth it. Because in that moment, I was realizing my only childhood dream. Little did I know that in 2 months, I was going to be actively suicidal, isolated, and constantly indulging in self-harm. The decline was rapid. I started questioning everything around me. It was like I didn't know who I was and whose life I had been living till now. I recognized that the skin that I was in, but what I didn't know was the person who occupied it. I hated my friends. I hated my family. But most importantly, I hated myself. I hated the face that looked back at me every time I looked in the mirror. I wanted to make myself bleed. It was something that had never happened to me before. Of course, I didn't know what was going on. This had never happened to me. I was crying all the time. But that was hard for me as well because I had never cried this much before. And I didn't want to cry in front of others because I felt that it made me appear weak. And if there was one thing that I was sure I was that I was strong. And I wanted to be strong with whatever it took. And so, I suffered in isolation. My parents were the first ones who told me that maybe I should visit a psychiatrist. I went along with them and sat in front of the doctor for an hour, staring back at him as blindly as possible. Every time he would ask me, how am I feeling, I had just one response. I am fine. But I was not fine. I did not want to accept that I was feeling empty. I did not want to accept that everything around me felt colorless. I did not want to accept that I was depressed. Because at that point of time, I felt that only weak people got depressed. And I am not weak, I am strong. My parents suggested that taking medications, talking to doctors would help, maybe even electroconvulsive therapy. I was told that giving electric shocks to my brain would force it into happiness, and yet it didn't work. I was told that taking medications would help and following the routine religiously would help. It didn't work. I was told that talking to others and sharing what I felt would help, but again, it did not work. Nothing was working. I had visited multiple psychiatrists in the time that I was depressed, but every time it was the same thing. Nothing seemed to be working for me. Everything seemed to fail. I remember clearly that around 1.5 years into my phase of depression, I had the psychiatrist sitting in front of me with red eyes and red cheeks. They didn't know what to do. They were all out of sorts. There was nothing left to be done. All treatments had failed. And I still wanted to kill myself. I was still making myself bleed any way I could. I once tried to kill myself, but it didn't work. As I lay there in the pool of my own blood, the dreams that my childhood self had seen seemed like a distant dream. I was not in college anymore. I was locked in my home. I could go out when I wanted to, but where should I have gone if I wanted to escape this voice in my mind? There was nowhere to go. There was no escape. This voice was running rampant in my mind. It was telling me things that I knew weren't true, but at that time, there was no one else that I did trust. I was still constantly indulging in self-harm. You see, before this, I had always thought that people who were depressed were always sad and crying, that they were somehow weak. But I did not know that this emptiness, this hollowness, this worthlessness that I felt like I was a burden to my family. It felt like I had no future. I felt helpless because all treatment options had failed. By this time, it was early 2017. I had been through this phase for 18 months. I had tried everything possible. All treatment options had failed. There was nothing else I could have done. Once again, I tried to kill myself. Once again, I failed. But this time, I thought to myself, I'm really bad at dying. So I tried to try my hand at something else. The next day, I did something out of pure desperation and as a pure cry for help. I wrote this long Facebook post about what I had been through. I had no idea what I was expecting off of it. But it was something that I felt I needed to do at that time. After a lot of thinking, a lot of doubt, it took a lot of courage to hit that one button, share. And then everything changed. I was swarmed by these comments about who I was and what I meant to other people. I had comments and reactions and messages from people that I didn't even remember I had met or interacted with at some point of my life. I remember teachers from my second grade or KG were commenting on that post telling me how much I meant to them. You see, before that, my mind had convinced me that I didn't matter, that it wouldn't matter if I died right now. And yet, here I had proof to the contrary. People were telling me the memories that we had shared, what I meant to them, what they remembered me as. And at that moment, I felt that little spark of hope lighting up inside me. Maybe, at that moment I thought, maybe people aren't as bad as I had convinced myself. Maybe I wasn't as bad as I had convinced myself to be. Maybe life was worth living. A few days later, I started writing my own blog, wherein I shared my thoughts and my feelings at the time, and it just felt so comforting to have a way out. Before that, I was unable to cry. I used to cry all the time, but then I controlled it to the degree that now I couldn't cry even if I wanted to. But those words, letting all those feelings out, it actually made me cry. It actually made me feel lighter and unburdened. It was at this time that I started seeing a new psychiatrist, but things were different this time though. This time I was actually cooperating with her. This time I was actually sharing what I felt. It was no longer that I am fine. It was, I need help. This time I accepted that it was not weak to be depressed. It was human. That it was not weak or strong who got depressed. It was people just like me. This time I accepted that I was sick and I needed help. The monster of clinical depression did not leave me untouched though. I had to drop out of medicine for something less intense, something less strenuous on my mental health. My dreams as a child were shattered. As I dropped out of medical college, I knew I wasn't going to be a doctor anymore. I could just hear my 11-year-old self saying, "Bhai, tu doctor banega," over and over again. It is hard to let go of your dreams, but sometimes you have to let go of them in order to take care of yourself. I learned that the hard way. In that moment, I felt directionless and hopeless. It was like I was a man in the middle of an ocean with nowhere to go. I was drowning with every breath I took, and it was just a matter of time before I finally drowned. But those comments, that Facebook post, it gave me a push to just try a little bit harder. It gave me a push to just try to get better. I started swimming. I started swimming towards my land. It was difficult. It was hard. It was almost impossible to come back from where I was. And yet, the support of those people just kept me going. My words, my spoken word and my written word ended up being a canoe for me to swim towards land. A means of transport in those tough times. Well, today the man lost in the middle of the ocean has found his way home. The boy who saw a dream to be a doctor is now an author of 2 books on mental health. Today, I speak to people about what depression really is and how debilitating it really is. About how it isn't only the weak who get depressed. I was one of the lucky ones who made it through. There are thousands of others like me who don't. I suffered for 18 months because I did not want to accept that I was depressed, that I was sick. Now, I try to ensure that no one else has to go through the same thing. I tried my hand at dying, but I was really bad at it. So now I'm trying to live a little. Live life my own style. Today, I'm trying to live my life by having my own legacy. I'm creating my own legacy, something for me to be left behind once I do eventually leave this planet. I'm trying to have my own impact on as many people as possible. Because, it is only in the memories of people that you live. There is only one mantra that I live by today. It is a certainty that you and I will die someday. That's not in our hands. What is in our hands, though, is how long we live once we die. I am Arjun Gupta, and this is my story.
Tell us what you think about this video and don't forget to like, share and subscribe.